New York smells of ink, coal, and wet rope. Ledgers glow under whale oil lamps. Clerks tally with brittle fingers. A farm boy hands over a crumpled banknote from a town you've never heard of. The shopkeeper squints, consults a note reporter, and discounts it with a sigh. Money is not one thing thinking. Itia killed Wildfree Banks. Shin plasters, drafts, promises scribbled on local pride. Counterfeits swim in the same stream as the real. Value depends on distance, reputation, and how quickly a horse can ride. War tears through this system like a nail through sailcloth. The Union must feed armies, arm factories. By iron, powder, rolling stock, time, gold flows west and abroad. Customs fall as ships hide in blockades. A government, with too many bills and too little coin, looks for a printing press shaped like policy. Salmonpe, Chaz, treasury with courtroom and abolitionist spine, stares at a map that looks like a balance sheet, not a geography. He needs credit that travels. Money that binds strangers, a market for debt that never yawns. He asks not just how to borrow, but how to reinvent what a dollar means. Greenbacks bloom in 1862, legal tender paper, a promise without metal. Contest editorials and Esh on payroll, debut team, and time buys, but they are an assist. They are a tourniquet on a bleeding limb, not the bones of a national body. The solution comes as a pair of acts with Carpenter's patience. The National Banking Act of 1863 and its stronger, braced and bolted twin of 1864. A plan to charter banks under federal law, to standardize notes, to police reserves. To make money portable because rules are portable, to finance the war by design. Here is the heart, deceptively simple, almost elegant. A national bank may issue notes, but only if it first buys U.S. bonds. Lock the bonds in Washington, receive plates and paper from the government. Print your bank's name on a note that looks like every other note in the Union. Bond-backed currency is more than a clever trick. It is a trilogy. It funds the war by creating steady demand for treasuries. It forces discipline because credit rides on collateral the bank cannot touch. It sows one face of money across a continent that cannot trust local stitching. You can feel the change with your hands. Notes with a Yablu Securdac, adores, Fédéral Vignette. The same sees, the same texture, the same promise in Ohio and Maine and Illinois, even as the bank name changes, even as the cashier's signature dries in a different town. The new law builds a sheriff with a ledger. The office of the controller of the currency, born in 1863 to watch the watchers. Examine balance sheets. Destreserve. Close the door on frauds with smiling faces. Print plates. Count redemptions. Publish lists that make confidence into routine. State banks do not vanish overnight. They argue with their feet. Some convert, lured by uniform, notes, and national prestige. Others cling to the old freedom, issue their own paper, resist Washington's hand. Congress answers with a 9-letter weapon in 1865. TAX, a 10% tax on state bank notes, quiet, brutal, surgical, too costly to fight. Too legal to dramatize, most state banks stop printing and learn a new language. Some adapt by inventing the checking account, deposits turned into handwritten money. The Wildcat era begins to end not in a bonfire, but in a filing cabinet. Note, reporters that once priced trust by town become historical curiosities. Merchants stop discounting because redemption at par becomes a habit. The cost of knowing money fades. The speed of using money grows. National Bank. Notes carry gold's grammar, without gold's weight. Par redemption at designated banks and treasury counters. Reserves in lawful money. Specie and greenbacks measured with a ruler you can point to. Counterfeiting fights a new army of engravers and paper with hidden threads. The system also reveals an unintended map, charters cluster, where bonds are cheap. Profits fat, examiners close at hand, the Northeast bristles with new banks and currency. The South, wrecked by war, the West, spread thin, learn shortage as a season. Bluebacks. Some call these notes for the wash of the security back. Not the Confederate blue that melts by war's end, but a federal blue that endures. Children save them in cigar boxes. Farmers fold them into Sunday coats. A single design stitches identity to daily bread. A dollar begins to feel like a nation. J. Cook, the salesman of Union Credit, does his work in the same wind. Posters, pamphlets, parlor speeches. The richest man, has bought. Bonds flow into the vaults of national banks to birth currency. Bonds flow into the stockings of widows to birth interest and loyalty. The triangle sharpens with use. Treasury prints bonds to pay soldiers and factories. Banks buy bonds to print notes that pay merchants and wages. The public buys goods and pays taxes that retire bonds and redeem notes at par. Yet, no system lives without friction, and the national one has splinters. Currency grows with the public debt and with bank profits, not with harvests and holidays, in autumn. Demand rises for cash to move crops, interest rates spike. New York becomes a reservoir with a nervous spillway, call money sloshes like tide. Reserve pyramids lean toward the street that never sleeps. Country banks keep reserves in city banks, who keep reserves with correspondents. A panic in the corner office becomes a drought. In Nebraska, in the same hour, clearinghouses improvise with loan certificates, private central banking in summer suits. The national system is also a dual system in disguise. State banks do not die. They reinvent, lower capital, local focus, deposit money. National banks grow formal and federal, bond portfolios and compliance in the same breath. America learns to live with two kinds of charter and one kind of ambition. The Supreme Court lends its ink to the frame. Legal tender cases wrestle with greenbacks, with the meaning of promise and paper. Eventually, the court blesses what war had forced. The notes remain, the contracts hold. Money becomes both statute and habit, both courtroom and counter. After Appomattox, a new argument shouts down the old gunfire. Hard money men demand contraction, resumption. Gold's return as an anchor with a chain. Soft money men demand growth, parity with jobs. A West that cannot borrow gold from Atlantic fog. Congress answers with the long patience of 1875, resumption in 1879, discipline delayed, not denied. When redemption in gold returns on New Year's Day. The national dollar reads the clock and keeps walking. Paper ceases to tremble because policy has a spine again. The blend is new, legal tender, and national bank notes. Greented, pawit gold. Examiners grow teeth with each crisis survived. Bank capital made of brick, not smoke, reserves as fact not rumor, frauds still sprout. As weeds do, but the plow is sharper. The OCC's annual reports become a national mirror that does not flatter. The South and West complain with reason that money is seasonal and far away. The national system can knit notes. But it cannot bend the crop calendar with bond arithmetic. the West invents populism with credit on its tongue. The East invents new paper to sell them with interest written in italics. By the 1890s, when silver's romance threatens gold's throne, the national currency holds its nerve under the weight of politics and grain. Par redemption remains a habit stronger than speeches. You can pay a wage in Kansas with a note born in Connecticut, and no one calls a reporter. In 1907, when copper corners and trust runs make Wall Street sweat cold, the national banks show both their strength and their limit. Notes cannot expand fast enough because bonds do not. J.P. Morgan becomes a one-man lender of last resort in a library that smells like leather and fear. The lesson becomes law in 1913. The Federal Reserve inherits the baton. Elastic currency at last, lender of last resort with a seal. But the Reserve inherits a race already run for 50 years. Par supervision, bon paquet d'habits, every. For households, the change was quieter than history books imply. You no longer negotiated a haircut for your money when you crossed a county line. You no longer carried a list of counterfeit tells to buy a shovel. You spent, were paid, saved, planned, because the symbol in your hand traveled as far as the train. For the Treasury, the system was a financial flywheel. As long as bonds existed, currency could exist. As long as currency was sound, taxes arrived as expected. As long as taxes arrived, bonds retired. Then recycled into the next bridge, the next school, the next storm. For the banks, discipline became a price of entry. Capital, reserves, examinations, redemption accounts in the great cities. Not a guarantee against failure, but a speed bump against fraud. Profits found in spread and service, not in printing your own faith with a pretty vignette. Confederate Bluebacks, inked in desperation and undone by defeat. Melted into the folklore of bad money, a caution told in porches and attics. Union Bluebacks, the blue-backed national notes, hardened into a custom of trust, two blues, two fates, one lesson about backing, about who stands behind the signature. Critics said the system favored Wall Street, and they were not wrong on Tuesdays. Bonds and reserves pull power toward the place where auctions live. But the alternative had been 13 currencies and 1,000 ambushs. Nationhood is a slope, not a cliff, and this one tilted toward common prices. You can still find the notes in antique shops, eagles and allegories, engines and farms. A bank title curled like ribbon under United States. Hold one, and you feel both the theater and the engineering. Art designed to persuade, paper designed to endure, law designed to travel. Today, when a dollar lands in a phone with a blink, it rides on layers the national banking acts began to pour: uniformity, supervision, collateral, and redemption, the recipe for trust baked into circuits that no longer smell of ink. If you map the chain of American money, it reads like a family tree. Greenbacks saved a war. National Bank notes made a nation. Gold resumption restored a promise. The Fed made elasticity legal and boring. Deposit insurance made panic expensive and rare. Each ring keeps the trunk upright when the wind returns with new names. The Acts of 1863 and 1864 did not end argument. They civilized it. They shifted money from a local accent to a national voice. They taught banks to borrow their right to issue from the public's patience. They linked the solvency of a bank to the credit of the state, and the credit of the state to the trust of its people. Stand outside a small-town hardware store in 1875. Watch a farmer pay with a blue-backed note from a bank in another state. No discount, no sneer, just change counted and the doorbell ringing for the next soul. That sound is nationhood without speeches, finance as the language of belonging. Walk into a vault, smell the iron and dry paper. Imagine bonds like bricks behind the notes that pass through fingers downstairs. Imagine an examiner's pen tapping twice when a figure is off. Imagine a country learning to trust itself because its money made it easier to mean the same thing everywhere. And when we argue today about what money is, digital, programmable, a ledger that breathes in clouds. Remember that form changes faster than function, and function rests on the same, trust the axe built. Collateral, supervision, uniform promise, portable law. If this story gave you a new way to see history, subscribe.